Hello. So one of the comments we received is the following, and it is, I'd like to know how to assess writing through WhatsApp. So my immediate response to that was, so would I. But joking aside, I think what I'd do is turn that around and say, why do we want to assess writing through WhatsApp? WhatsApp is a particular technological application, and what we need to ask ourselves is, why are we assessing in that particular application? And there's just fundamental questions around any assessment that we approach that we'd want to ask ourselves. Is the kind of writing that we're engaging with in that particular environment, is it useful? Is to the purposes that we're engaging with learning and teaching with our students? If it is, what are the features of writing in WhatsApp that we're particularly interested in engaging with and understanding? So is the format, is the mode, is the channel that we're engaging with, is it eliciting the kind of writing that is going to be useful for what we want our students to do? Is the purposes, not just the technological application, the purposes for which we might be using that application, does that align with the purposes that we're going to be engaging in writing with our students? So I think there's a lot of fundamental questions we'd want to ask ourselves about why we use WhatsApp and how we would use WhatsApp. Now, there are technological questions about how we might actually evaluate that in terms of getting the responses, saving the responses, how we ensure that the student we want to is writing those responses. But I think even before we get to those technological questions, we'd be asking ourselves, okay, if we agree that it is in line with what we would like our students to do in terms of writing, when we talk about how we evaluate it, it's what are we evaluating? What is the kind of evaluation criteria we're going to use? How do we actually look at that writing? And what are the features of good writing in a WhatsApp context that we would want to be able to identify? And what are the features or problematic aspects of writing that we would want to give our students feedback on? Ideally, I think in those kinds of situations, we'd probably have to admit that there's going to be a security issue, and so we'd be probably wanting to use it in a very low-stakes situation, a situation where we can engage with the learners following on from the assessment to make sure that any decisions we've made can actually be verified in that sort of ongoing learning context. But I think there's a lot of useful potential applications, but I think the fundamental questions are why and in what context, and what kind of features do we then expect to elicit in that kind of WhatsApp environment that we would want to identify as good writing?